I'm Shulin, here to inspire you on the infinite possibilities after the bar. Season 1 saw us talking about the journeys of different lawyers. We're now into Season 2, where we'll be focusing more on how success means different things for different people. And we're also going to hear more about the incredible work that lawyers do. So I've been eagerly anticipating today's interview. We have a criminal lawyer here today. He's going to talk about some very high-profile cases that shook our nation. He's also going to share about his views on the death sentence, as well as a person's right to a lawyer when arrested by the police. He's none other than Sunil Sudheesan. Sunil is a well-known criminal lawyer. He was personally mentored by his late uncle, Subhas Sudheesan, Singapore's most well-known criminal lawyer. And I was very, very lucky because during my time as a DPP, we actually worked across each other on cases. He was personally mentored by Subhas for more than 10 years, and they worked on many landmark cases that really shaped the face of criminal law. So I'm just going to name a few of these cases. Some of these cases are the Huang kidnapping case, when an 8-year-old girl was kidnapped and unfortunately murdered. Also, One-Eyed Dragon, in Chinese, the Du Yanlong, one of the top hitmen for a very powerful gang. And we're also going to talk about a very gruesome, infamous Kallang body parts case involving Leong Siu Chaw. And more recently this year, Sunil's name has been in the headlines for the case with the 19-year-old boy who was charged with the alleged murder of his own father. Welcome, Sunil. Thanks
Hi,
for
Shulin.
coming on After the Bar.
Happy to help.
Great. So on your LinkedIn page, your profile has just one line. It's, in fact, the shortest LinkedIn profile I've ever seen. I want to be the best criminal lawyer in Singapore. And you've been a criminal lawyer now for coming to 2 decades. Yeah. So how has it been?
First, let me talk about that LinkedIn profile. Well, there was a time where I was thinking about SEO. You'll be an expert at SEO, of course. So I wanted best criminal lawyer out there somewhere. So I want to be, and then it will come out and such. But the journey has been tricky, ups and downs, of course. Criminal law doesn't pay as much as other lucrative areas of the law. So, but I think the sense of fulfillment it gives me over the last few years has been quite useful. Working with a strong team.
Amazing. And we will hear more about all your work. So your first 10 years was spent working directly with your late uncle Subhas. I'm sure you get asked a lot about Subhas. What was it like working with him?
It was tricky, and fulfilling. You have to understand, I went into the law mostly because of him.
Yes.
Sunday lunches when the family would gather, he would tell about stories where he would be helping people and stuff like that. So that's when I think my first thoughts of helping the underdog formed.
Yes.
And then after that, starting work itself, he moved from being an uncle to a boss uncle.
It must have been tricky, right?
So I suppose we would, at the early days, it was easy because whatever he says, you just do, right?
Yes.
Then after that, you grow up and you think you're Tuhan now. And you start having your own thoughts. And then obviously there'll be friction.
Yes.
Because there'll be a certain inclination to go one way or the other. But I suppose we worked out quite well in the end in terms of how we built the team. Diana joined us and I could take a break.
Yeah.
And what do you call that? We had fun.
Because it's like the uncle-nephew dynamic and then mentor-mentee.
Yep.
And then when you kind of grew up, so it was towards the tail end, I suppose, the second half of the 10 years.
I think I started getting smarter after 5 years in practice. Before that, you're quite a Dumbo. And then you work on it and you grow smarter and you learn the tricks.
Okay. So in the Sunday Times back in 2003, I remember there was this headline with Subhas's photo. And the headline was, "Murderers, maid abusers, rapists, and he defends them all." And followed by the words, "Top criminal lawyer Subhas Sudheesan believes every accused person deserves a proper trial." What's your personal belief?
Many criminal lawyers feel that way. We feel that we are part of an essential system of determining guilt. So criminal lawyers, we come in, we put aside our own judgments where possible. And we help an accused person based on what we have. So if, let's say, there's a particularly heinous crime, you don't run away from those facts, right? You have to deal with the facts straight on, and you see whether there's anything else you can raise to try and help this accused person. So I think knowing that that is our specific role, guilt to be determined by the court, right? Evidence gathering will be by the police, and how the prosecutorial discretion is exercised depends on our friends in AGC.
Yes, I was once your friend at AGC.
Yes, right. That's right.
Yeah, I want to ask, how do you deal with criticism for your beliefs? Have you had criticism for your beliefs?
I can't recall any particular criticism, except the fact that maybe I'm not billing enough. but I think I've got more praise than criticism actually. So
that's good to know.
I'm quite thankful. I mean, my classmates in law school always say, "Oh, your name in the papers again" and stuff like that. But that's because I got quite lucky.
Yeah, it's always in the papers. In fact, in an interview in 2015, you mentioned that one should also have drive, passion, and fighting for the underdog, which that's why you're a Liverpool fan club member. Yeah,
that's right.
And you have a keen desire to address unfairness. So that's what drives you, is it? How much of that passion for the underdog, is that something that Subhas believed in too?
I think so. I think he was always standing up for the little guy. The unfortunate thing is the little guys we help sometimes have done terrible things, right? So sympathy is not the first emotion that comes to mind when you work with such persons. That's the nature of the job. But still, in blue-collar crimes, at least, we see many very honest and direct clients that say, "Sir, we did this. I did this, can you help me?" Or family members come, because they are the innocents, right? And they come and say that, "Look, our family member did this, how do you help us? Can you help us?" and stuff like that. So helping the little guy has always been the forefront of our practice.
Yeah. In fact, just before we started the interview, you were interviewed by CNA about the Public Defender's Office. And in a way, that's going to help the little guy. And I understand, because when I was a DPP, a lot of people were driven by circumstances. No excuses and justifications for some of the things they did. But yes, you're right. Sympathy does not immediately come. But when you hear about their stories, some of their stories are very sad. So the Public Defender's Office, what's your take on that?
Well, I think it's a great step. It's going to help accused persons who come from the 0 to 35th percentile in terms of income. So by definition, these are the poorer members of society who have come into trouble with the criminal justice system and need help. There'll be about 11 or 12 lawyers in the PDO. PDO will be complemented by CLASS, the Criminal Legal Aid Scheme, which has been running since 85.
Yes.
And I think together they will handle the bulk of poor accused persons, which is a very good thing.
Yeah, it is a very good thing. Okay, we are going to talk about the high-profile cases.
Okay. To caveat, high-profile cases, I was still that young, skinny lawyer who didn't know much, and I was just essentially carrying the bags.
Okay, but you were working on the cases.
Yep.
Yeah. So, these are headline-grabbing cases. And one of the cases that has stuck in my memory, and I'm sure the memories of many of the listeners out there, was about 8-year-old Huang. Her disappearance resulted in a nationwide search, and her body was eventually discovered in a box dumped at Telok Blangah Hill Park. And the accused was Tuk Leng Hao. He was charged with the murder, and he was a 24-year-old man with an IQ of 76 and schizophrenia. He was hung in 2006 after President Naden rejected the plea of clemency. And Subhas recorded Tuk's case in the book, in his memoir, The Best I Could, which was first published in 2009. What I found very interesting was that he firmly believed that Tuk did not deserve the death sentence, and that the murder conviction was wrong. So I wanted to hear your views. Like, even though you were a young associate, I'm sure you had your own views.
At the time, I remember drafting the Court of Appeal submission. So obviously, I was quite sincere in my belief that the death penalty was not necessary for Ahau, as he was called then. There was IMH psychiatrist who said nothing wrong with Ahau, and there was a private psychiatrist, our psychiatrist, who said schizophrenia. That's why Ahau didn't take the stand, because we were relying on an exception under the law to say that if you have a psychiatric condition, there will be no adverse inference to be drawn should you remain silent. Okay. Eventually, when it came to the Court of Appeal, it was a 2-1. And 2-1 Court of Appeals at that time were extremely rare. So having the 2-1, the one dissenting voice was Kan Ting Chew, of course.
Yes, yes.
And who incidentally I just had dinner with yesterday together with Chow, but that's a separate thing.
Okay.
But Kan Ting Chew's dissent gave me a lot of hope.
Yes.
When it came to the clemency petition.
Yeah.
Because I was quite confident that, look, if we can tell the president that, look, it's a 2-1, that means 33% of the Court of Appeal thought there was some doubt as to murder. Isn't this the perfect opportunity for presidential powers to be exercised?
Yes.
But the president didn't exercise the powers as such. And
he took a long time, right?
He took, I think Subhas said he took 2 more months longer than usual.
Yeah.
But that's because it's not the president. The president is, if you would, signing off what the cabinet tells the president to sign off on for clemency petitions.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we couldn't convince the cabinet in that sense.
Yeah, which is such a pity. And when we had coffee, I remember you sharing with me that Huang Na's parents themselves, they canvassed for signatures.
That's right. So my memory is about 20,000 over signatures.
Yes.
They were actually camped out at Woodlands MRT station, if memory serves. And they'll be saying that this is the petition, and people will be going up to them and signing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is not e-signature, e-petitions.
Exactly. This is back then, there was no such thing.
Correct. So, I mean, looking at the way a particular segment of society, those courageous people in the north, they were signing the petition, which I thought was a fantastic thing for all those who did. And I thought that would have really swayed the clemency petition.
Yes. So for Huang Na's parents, for the parents of an 8-year-old girl who was murdered, to forgive the accused and think that he doesn't deserve the death sentence is a huge about turn. Because I remember back then, I mean, I was younger, but I remember the headlines, everyone was like crucifying the man. But there was a big switch because the media already condemned Ahau. And then after that, it was almost an about turn. Everyone was like thinking, this guy doesn't deserve to die.
So like what Subhas said, many people who were not sympathetic became sympathetic by virtue of the evidence that was unveiled during the trial.
What was that evidence?
You see, forensically, there were some issues about causation as to whether she had a history of fits, if I'm not mistaken. There was bruising on the tongue. So that could have been reflective of a different cause of death as opposed to the strangulation or whatever the prosecution was alleging. So that in itself creates an element of doubt. For me, the greatest element of doubt was raised when Ahau actually escaped Singapore. He walked across the causeway, and it was in Malaysia. And eventually he spoke to his parents, and the parents said that, look, if you didn't do it, you should go back to Singapore. That's how he returned to Singapore. So that means he technically fled the jurisdiction already, could have stayed hidden for the rest of his life.
Oh, yeah.
But he came back because he was told that, look, if you didn't do it, you should go back. And he did.
Right.
And then he got hanged.
In Subhas's memoir, I remember that, and also I saw on Wikipedia, that you, Subhas, and Subhas went for the wake of Ahau, which is highly, highly unusual for Subhas because, I mean, I'm sure Subhas had a lot of clients who have been hung. What made it so different for him? Why did he make an exception to attend the wake of his client?
I think for Ahau's wake, Subhas was particularly touched by the sincerity of the parents. I remember the parents bringing fruit to the office, and then Subhas would share in the office, right? To thank Subhas for the work that was done. So they were good people. He knew they loved their son. They went to Woodlands to go and get those signatures and all that.
Yes.
So, when you go for people's funerals, I suppose, or people's wakes, you're also looking to comfort the people that are truly hurt by the death.
I see.
So in that case, I think Subhas felt a whole lot of sympathy for the parents.
Subhas seemed like he was against the mandatory death sentence from what I've read from all his interviews. And the two of you differed on this view, right?
No. Actually, we both are not. He was not in support of the mandatory death penalty. I'm not in support either. I think perhaps the death penalty is necessary for certain crimes, but I've always held the view that there should be discretion with the judges.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about Huang Na's case, if there was some element of discretion there in terms of whether death penalty or not, or life imprisonment, then I think with a 2-1, it would be quite certain that this fellow would still be alive now.
Yeah.
But at that time, the law was mandatory death
Yes.
for 300C murder. So
Okay.
there we go.
Yes.
There was another thing that struck me about Tuk Ling Hao's case. Now, when we were doing the research for the presidential clemency, we came across, of course, the American example. And in America, if I'm not mistaken, if your IQ is below 70, they can't effect the death penalty.
Yeah.
So our case was 76, right? And we were hoping that with the IQ of 76, with our own private psychiatrist, which said schizophrenia, perhaps this was really not the best guy to hang.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Good point.
I mean, fast forward to this year, there was another case whereby psychiatric components were raised belatedly in the Court of Appeal. Court of Appeal had a few comments to make about why certain reports weren't shown to the Court of Appeal, so that was a bit concerning. But maybe it's time to relook the situation of low IQ executions.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the mark? Number one. Number two, can people fake low IQ?
Yep.
So there are those things to think
There are
about.
a lot of things to think about.
But I think it's a conversation that we need to have.
For sure. And it's a topic that hits very close to my heart because my younger sister has special needs. She is low IQ. So, I mean, in the recent case where there was the person who imported drugs into Singapore, Nagendran, is it? Nagulendran, yeah, sorry. And what did you think about that? There was like international media covering that. There was so much, everyone was up in arms about the death sentence.
So my own thoughts there are, notwithstanding the low IQ, I think that was the primary ground that could have been raised for the presidential clemency component. It was not so much for the court to weigh in on this, but the court did in fact weigh in. The appeal itself, I think, had a five-judge appeal court, and the subsequent applications and all that were before a full court of appeal as well, where arguments were ventilated. Certain reports were not given, like I said just now, and but the court didn't have much control. The court can't say, "Oh, you got low IQ, that's why I'm not hanging you." The court doesn't have that kind of power. That goes, if anything, to the president and the cabinet.
I see. But what's your personal take on that, having read everything?
From me, in that case, it seems that there was sufficient psychiatric reasons to find guilt. Okay, from the evidence that was raised, I think, and the lawyers did a tremendous job raising as much as they could. But the eventual finding was that this fellow knew what he was doing.
Okay.
So the fear, of course, is that syndicates overseas will start sending people with low IQ to bring in
Targeting them.
drugs.
Yes.
And then Singapore will be stuck in a position whereby, if you target low IQ people, and then we have to hang so many low IQ people, maybe we look bad, maybe you shouldn't hang, and then more drugs come in.
Oh dear.
Okay, so that's
no
one.
perfect system.
There's no perfect system.
Yeah.
So if you hang everybody,
Oh dear.
then maybe syndicates don't want to use people with low IQ because they have a greater tendency of getting caught. So go
Right.
figure. I mean, the
My
argument.
gosh,
The
you did not
argument.
even think about all these permutations.
That's right. So I think the
Okay.
powers that be have done their fair share of thinking. But as criminal lawyers, I mean, we understand the need for the death penalty in certain circumstances. But mandatory, that's
Yeah.
the conversation we want to have.
Yeah, I agree actually. I agree with this view. Rather than no death penalty at all, there might be situations, you know.
But in fact, the law has changed over the last few years. Ministry of Law switched. If you remember, 300C of the Penal Code under murder used to be mandatory death. Now it's death or life.
Yes, yes.
Okay. For the drug cases as well, there's the certificate of substantial assistance. There is psychiatric conditions which you can raise to avoid the death penalty. So there's more and more scope given to the courts to consider. But to a certain extent, it is still quite binary, but not as binary, if you would.
So both you and Subhas shared the same view that he was against the mandatory death penalty, but there are situations where
Yep.
it might be necessary.
Correct.
Okay. What are those situations?
If you think about, let's say, no mental condition, child rapist, murderer.
Okay, yes, indeed. Okay, got it. Yep. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
So we are going to talk about...
To happier things.
Okay, yeah, something a little bit more sensational, if you will. The one-eyed dragon. So in Chinese, the 独眼龙, because he's blind in one eye, right? So this is the story of the gangster who shot a nightclub owner in front of his wife and helper. So if you think the only gunshots you hear in Singapore are military or police training, you'll be wrong. Because in 2006, a man was shot 6 times, and the gunman apparently had 6 guns, 203 bullets, and he's known by many, this is known by many as the one-eyed dragon murder. It took Singapore by storm because the killer was not found even after 10 days. So it's very, very rare in Singapore to have gun assassinations. It's only something we usually see on TV. And you played an integral part in this case. I was very amused because Subhas said you could speak Mandarin. So you had to go to, Changi prison with him.
But you see, the thing is, Subhas didn't know how bad my Mandarin was.
Oh.
He will hear me having a conversation with a client in Mandarin and think, hey, this fellow can talk. Then I don't know, I was probably massacring the language, but that's besides the point.
So people underestimate you because they don't expect you to speak Mandarin, right? Half the time.
Yeah. Then after that, you throw 1 or 2 phrases and then they take a step back.
The gangster. So you went there to Changi prison and, okay, actually what I found very striking was the one-eyed dragon was denied counsel when he first requested for it. He changed his mind. He was representing himself first, right? Then he realized, he cannot do closing on himself. But the trial judge turned down his request. And then I think on appeal, he managed to get Subhas and then you involved.
That's right.
Yeah.
Subhas, he sort of was an acquaintance with the victim in this case. So he didn't really want to take up the case.
The nightclub owner.
That's right. So, but when it came to the Court of Appeal, because you're not going to cross-examine anybody, you're just going to argue the appeal before the court of 3 judges, then that's where he said that, look, this fella, although he did these things, I'm willing to help. And became on board now.
And how was it like for you when you're a young associate, you went to Changi prison, you met this guy, 独眼龙?
Well, first, he didn't have any guns in prison, right?
Okay, yes.
Second, he seemed a normal guy, right? Many of our clients are normal people. And we're trying to understand why he was triggered to such an extent.
No pun intended. Actually, why? What happened? Was he...
There was some dispute and all that.
See.
But he went there with 1 gun, I think, not 6.
Okay.
He may have had a few at home. And this fellow also fled to Malaysia and was arrested because...
Malaysia is like the popular place for your clients to escape to.
But this guy was arrested because of the efforts of the Malaysian police and Singapore police.
Wow.
So slightly different from Ahau, who voluntarily returned.
Yes.
Yeah, but for us, we were looking at whether specific defenses could apply or not. Because Tu Yen Long was not charged under murder. He was charged with Arms Offences Act. And under that particular act, I mean, the intentional discharge of a firearm can qualify you for the death penalty already. So that's mandatory as well.
Wow.
And the defenses there are slightly different.
And in that case, was it right to say that he shot the victim in front of the wife and the helper?
I think
there was some dispute there, right?
Yeah, they were at home. Whether everybody could see everything was in doubt. Whether all 6 shots impacted the body or not.
But it was him lah. There was no doubt.
There was no identification issue.
Okay, and I'm curious because he was described as a number 1 hitman for a gang. So was this the first time he got caught? Like all those other times he killed people and he
Then I'm not sure, I think there's a bit of sensationalism.
Okay.
As far as I know, he didn't kill anybody else.
Yeah, because I was thinking if he did, he wouldn't have gotten away. Yeah. Okay. And Subhas had his view on the fact that the Tu Yen Long was denied counsel when he requested for it. Actually, what was he thinking? Why was he defending himself?
He didn't get along with his earlier lawyer, I think. And then, once there are these kind of disagreements, he discharged 1 or 2 lawyers, if I'm not mistaken. And then he carried on with the trial on his own and then asked for a lawyer for the closing arguments.
Yeah.
The court didn't allow at that point of time because it would basically delay the entire process, you see, especially when he was given the option earlier. But because of the nature of the case, there was certainly one constitutional argument we had to raise on appeal. And we said that could have changed things to a certain extent. But I suppose the rejoinder from the Court of Appeal is, look, you are putting in all the arguments now and we can consider the arguments now, so there's no real prejudice. So that's how it went.
Okay, so one more question about this case, but more general, because when I was a DPP, I was also in a case where the accused person defended himself. Is that always a bad idea?
He who represents himself as a fool for a client.
Okay, well said.
Well,
yeah.
That being said, I've seen certain accused persons in appeal argue cases much better than some lawyers do.
Wow.
So
okay.
So you never really know.
Yeah.
But I think if you're representing yourself, you don't see things objectively. Because you think you know the truth and you think the truth will set you free. But lawyers know that truth is all a matter of perspective. And if you don't get the proper perspective sold, if you would, to the judge, then you lose your case, even though you're telling the truth. So we've seen cases whereby what I think are people who are not guilty being found guilty. And of course, the converse applies.
Of course.
Right? You would have seen persons who are guilty, in your opinion, who have been found not guilty. That's the nature of the system.
And now we're going to talk about the other case, which very interestingly, the One-Eyed Dragon befriended another client of yours. So in jail, they were both in jail at the same time, Leong Siu Cho. So the man who was sentenced to death for the Kallang body parts case. It's very gruesome because it's such a brutal murder. The body of a 22-year-old woman was hacked into 7 pieces, stuffed into 5 cardboard boxes and plastic bags, and dumped in various locations. It's like what you see in the movies. And I'm going to ask the obvious. How do you do this case without your stomach churning?
Well, for us, you have to remember there were 2 components to the crime. The first was the causing of the death. That was done with the strangulation of the towel, which I had to demonstrate in court, but that's a separate story.
Wow, how did you...
No, the DPP, this was a Subhas Sabo job. The DPP asked the accused to demonstrate the murder, and then they decided to take out the actual murder weapon, which was this towel, and they put the towel around I was
You were the victim?
I was the dummy victim.
Oh my gosh.
So I went forward
Are there
and
any
used
photos from that?
no, but what came out, and I talk about this in a different series. My mother's relatives were all very upset. They said, how can you use the actual murder weapon? And that made me take the 7-flower shower.
Oh, okay, like very pantang, right? Yeah.
So anyway,
Okay.
there was the causing of the death
Yes.
using the towel, and then after that, this fellow is in shock as to what he has done, and then he decides to dispose the body, and he decides to dispose the body in that particular way.
Yeah.
So that didn't look very good.
No.
And but we didn't have to deal with that very much in trial, because that is actually frankly irrelevant to the
Okay.
causing of death,
I see.
which we say was consensual.
Okay.
At that point of time,
Can you give us more details?
the instructions to us, and this is the case we ran in court, was look, it was consensual. It's supposed to be a suicide pact. He was supposed to kill her first, then kill himself, but he didn't kill himself, and then realized that he had killed her, and decided to dispose of the body. Yeah.
I see.
The DPPs and the courts didn't believe that story.
Were there suicide notes?
Not that I can recall. But the prosecution's case, and what the court found was that he actually stole money using her ATM card. And then she found
Before or
out.
after? Oh, before. Okay.
And then she found out, got angry and all
I
that.
see.
And then their case theory was he killed her to silence her because she was going to go forward and
I see.
complain and all that, right?
How much money? Do you remember?
Not much.
Okay.
Not much.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
so that's the case.
Oh wow. Okay, so he's not as hardcore a criminal as the person that he befriended, the one-eyed dragon.
Yeah, that one
Yeah.
was
I
much,
see.
much more premeditation there.
Yeah. And with the process of investigations and lawsuits, given that it was such a high stakes case, like every newspaper was reporting on it, how did you deal with the pressure? How many years PQE were you back then? PQE is post qualified experience. How many years of experience do you have?
I think 3 or 4. No, this 2007, right? Or thereabouts.
Yeah.
Um,
So a few years
a
experience.
few years in, still learning a lot.
Yes.
But by virtue of the fact that I was working at Subhas, it was deep end training for a consistent period, so your learning curve is very steep, and that was useful in terms of practice, but not so good in terms of burnout and weight gain. So in terms of pressure, we didn't. What was critical at that time was trying to figure out his mental state, number one,
The mental state of
the offender,
right.
to see whether any psychiatric defense was available. And then in this case, there wasn't. So I think it was Subhas has another nephew, Anand Alachandran. I think he was the one who saw defense of consent as a general, as a special defense to murder. So that's when we started running that.
But it didn't work.
It didn't work.
Despite your demonstration. And actually, after dealing with such intense, in this case, gruesome cases, did you find it difficult to return back to normal life? It's like, you have it in your mind, right? And you just got pretend strangled in court.
At that time, you're dealing with, trial is high adrenaline period, extremely taxing. So at that point of time, and you have to run the case, go through the evidence and all that, and then do the submissions. Submissions is the tiring part, where we have to pull everything together and put cogent arguments that you hope the court will buy, right?
Yep.
So what happened then was we lost the trial, and we went up to appeal, and we argued the appeal and lost the appeal. And then we realized after the appeal court came up with its judgment that they considered evidence which was not admitted below, but it was erroneously put into the record.
Oh.
So there were additional statements that went in which should not have gone in. And that was the first and only time that we filed a post-appeal application to the Court of Appeal, a fresh criminal motion to say that, look, the earlier Court of Appeal considered evidence it should not have considered. and this new Court of Appeal should consider the case afresh. But we didn't succeed there.
Wow. So those evidence was introduced by the prosecution.
It came out in the preliminary inquiry bundle, but there was a bit of a mix-up as to whether it was to go in or not. But anyway, these things happen.
Okay. So now that we've discussed these three cases, the reason why they were so sensational was because Xinmin, Wanbao, New Paper, Straits Times, back then media called SBC, whatever you call it, every news outlet covered it. Even Malaysian papers would cover it. Something has changed, right? Because we don't see as much sensational news reporting now, today, as opposed to 10, 15 years ago. What's changed?
I like to think that the press is a bit more careful in terms of, if you would, painting a very dramatic picture. They moved away from that kind of sensational news reporting. I mean, things will still shock the nation, right?
Yep.
And things will still need to be reported in the way that they are. But the press is concerned about tainting the court process, and sub judice laws are something that I know media outlets are very concerned about. So while there is an element of human interest in certain things, I think they've become a lot more respectful of the court process.
Yeah. Because what we see on TV, a lot of American TV, is that they have jury trials. In Singapore, it's all decided by the judges.
Yep.
So my question is, whatever the media is reporting, arguably, it shouldn't affect the verdict so much, because these are judges, they are more rational, much more intelligent, and they do this for a living.
Yeah, but then you don't want a situation of mob justice. You don't want a situation whereby, you report certain things and say, oh, this fella's background is like that.
Right.
And then suddenly social media explodes and say, oh, he should hang. And then a whole flurry of, viral posts come out and all that. So I think that's what they want to avoid.
I see. Okay, interesting. So yeah, there has been a shift away from sensational reporting. Okay, we're going to ask a little bit more about your thoughts on the criminal justice system. Can you say, in as simple terms as possible, what does one do when arrested by the police? Do you ask to speak to a lawyer? Because what we see on TV is, oh, you have the right to remain silent. But actually, if you keep quiet and not say anything in Singapore, there is a negative adverse inference.
Adverse inferences can be drawn if you remain silent. So that's why when you are called up by the police, you are supposed to list out elements which will help in your defense. But you may not know what these elements are unless you are legally trained.
Yeah.
So we see a bit of an imbalance there, a power imbalance. Some accused persons do not want to hide certain things which may actually be good for their case because they don't know any better. So I would advocate for accused persons to be informed of their rights, actually, what they can or should not say, whether they have a privilege against self-incrimination, stuff like that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so this area of the law is still growing. We've been pushing for access to counsel to a limited extent.
Yes.
We've succeeded sometimes and failed in other times.
And you were in the papers recently because of your 19-year-old client who requested for access to you, I presume.
We asked for access,
Oh.
the court mentioned.
Okay.
We said that we wanted 1 hour of time with him to just explain to him what his rights are under the law, and go through certain elements of culpable homicide and murder with him and the exceptions there, so that he'll know how to explain things to the police.
So this was him after he got arrested for the alleged murder of his dad. Quite frankly, if a family member, hopefully not, but if that day comes when someone calls me, hey, I've been arrested by the police, what do I say to that person?
So what happens in usual cases is that family members or friends or acquaintances will reach out to us and say, hey, we got this guy who has been arrested. What can you do? And I tell them, frankly, within the first 48 hours, nothing much. But when the fella goes to court on the first mention, we should be present to argue for at least the Law Society pamphlet of rights to be given to that person so that there is some basic understanding of the law imparted to him, if you would. So yeah, we'll go to court and argue for access to counsel and see what can be done.
But the thing is, the first 48 hours of getting arrested, that is what I'm interested in. Because you might be remanded in prison.
No?
Interrogated by the police.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, under the law, the police can hold you for 48 hours. They'll keep you in the police station and interview you.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's when a lot of incriminating statements are recorded.
So what to do? Because you say something, you might get incriminated. You don't say anything, there's also a negative inference. So what's the best to do?
Well, my view has always been you give your explanation as to why certain things were done.
Okay.
That's number one. Number two, you have the situation whereby you agree or disagree whether you have done a certain thing or not, right? And you have to know that in Singapore now there's a whole host of sources of objective evidence. For example, there are CCTVs everywhere.
Everywhere.
Which
there are many cameras on us now.
Which frankly is quite useful in terms of objective evidence gathering, because at the heart of the criminal justice system is you want to get the right guy, right? And especially if that guy has done something wrong. So if you say I wasn't there, and then there's a CCTV of you there slashing somebody with a knife, I mean,
you can't argue against that.
Yeah, you can argue as to what your mental element or mental state was at that time, whether it was self-defense, whether it was a brutal slashing, for example. I mean, nobody would say that, but the issue is whether they explain their particular behavior or not.
So back to the 48 hours, we have established that actually we have no right to remain silent. Is that right to say?
Well, the law is you do not need to say anything which may incriminate yourself.
Right.
Correct? But if you fail to state certain things at that point of time, you may be less likely to be believed later on.
I see.
So that's the warning given in the caution statement, for example.
Okay. So I used to work with a lot of IOs, investigation officers. My uncle was a police officer for many, many years. I have a lot of respect for the police. My question is, 48 hours, you're being interrogated by the police. Maybe you're hungry, you're scared, emotions run high. The chances of you saying something incriminating are there, So
and maybe that's the design of the system.
Right. So what's your best advice if someone listening to this unfortunately gets arrested one day, other than eventually contacting you after 48 hours? What's the best piece of advice you can give them?
Well, for them, I think they need to explain the nature of their actions. Most cases we get are situations whereby people admit to doing certain things, but what is yet to be discovered is why they have done certain things. So if the why can be explained to the investigation authorities, that will give a different complexion to the case. If you hide certain things and only raise it later, for example, then they say, you never say in the first 48 hours. That's why we don't believe you.
Oh, so just stick to the facts.
Yeah. I mean, in that sense, different crimes are different.
Right. Yeah, that's true, because if you only bring it up later on, you can't say you forgot.
Correct.
Right? So fresh it should be in your memory.
So let's say the crime of rape. And the standard defense is whether it's consensual or not, right? So if you don't talk about consent during that first 48 hours and then later you say there was consent, then you'll be less likely to be believed. And that makes sense also,
yes,
right?
It makes sense.
About it.
And the judge will obviously look at everything. Okay. If you have a magic wand, Sunil, what are 3 things you would change about our criminal legal system?
I would want the prosecution to object less to community-based sentences.
Okay.
So, for example, mandatory treatment orders and all that. Whenever the defense asks, they should just agree. The second thing is Access to counsel, I think it's quite pertinent. How much access can be given, that's up for debate. What's the bare minimum required, that's up for debate as well. But I think that's a conversation that we need to have. Personally, I would say lawyers should be present so that accused persons can ask. And lawyers would then share what elements are under the law, for example. Lawyers can't coach people what to say, obviously.
Yeah.
Right? Mandatory death should be taken away. I think we should be confident enough in our judges to give them discretion.
Yes.
And for them to do the right thing.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, on that note, you've had so many clients. Some of them, not all of them have been sentenced to death, obviously. They've gotten out of jail. And we have the Yellow Ribbon Project. How many of your clients do you see actually really, rehabilitating and turning over a new leaf?
Well, I think one of the best things that can happen to a criminal lawyer is that your clients don't come back looking for the same kind of help.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Second, there have been obviously clients who have become good friends after we help them because they appreciate the sincerity of our work. There are clients that, of course, don't want to see us anymore because we remind them of difficult times in their lives, and that we can fully understand. But the clients who have become friends, well, they're good guys, and it's heartening to see them move on with their life, accepting what happened then, and carrying on as best as they can.
Okay, I'm going to ask, how do you separate your emotions when you see the parents and loved ones of your client? Like just now you were saying, how Subhas was affected by the parents. How do you stay sane?
I eat a lot. Good sushi by Chef Eugene. That's a plug for him. But I think you talked about parents of accused persons, so that gives us motivation. But then sometimes we see parents of victims, and that you would have seen from your job, right? Last time. But when defense counsel see also, we don't really feel hatred coming from victims' people. Okay, I think many people know that lawyers do their job, but we obviously, when we see that, we feel we have to have some insight and EQ, right? That they are obviously suffering as well. But jobs need to be done.
Yeah. So you're a strong advocate for pro bono work. And when I was still a lawyer, I did volunteer quite a bit. And you also mentioned during our coffee, we can't make pro bono work mandatory, which I agree. Yep. But how else are you going to encourage more lawyers to take on free work when they're already so busy? They're trying to get billables.
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, the firm I'm in is quite supportive of the pro bono work that we do. So that's heartening. But I think I'm lucky because for crime, it's very easy to do pro bono work, right? There are many avenues there. And it doesn't make sense for a corporate lawyer to take a criminal file. Correct?
No.
So for example, corporate lawyers would see their time better spent helping with, let's say, an NGO.
Like fundraising.
Correct, fundraising, that kind of thing. Or specific legal work. Or sending a client with a lot of money there to, let's say, support an organization like Awela, for example.
Yes.
Right? So I think because of our skill set, we should do things which we are suited for. It doesn't make sense so much for lawyers to, let's say, go and paint walls, for example, or distribute food. I mean, it's good.
Yes.
But that 1 hour you spend distributing food, can you imagine the value add that you could help in, let's say, drafting a contract for a particular NGO? That may be more useful.
Yeah. Makes sense. A lot of it has to do with the culture of the firm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think lawyers look at firms to, when you're training as a lawyer and when you're in law school, you do your internships and all that. I think people look to see what kind of firm they're going to join. That's the whole purpose of internship. They look at the culture of the firm, whether people drink a lot or have a lot of fun or just work all the time into the crazy hours at night, or a mixture of both, which is a good balance, if you ask me, in the first few years.
Yes.
and then whether the firm gives back.
Mm-hmm.
I think many law firms in Singapore do.
Mm.
Many law firms in Singapore give back without people taking note as well.
Mm.
But they do it because, it doesn't matter who sees you helping,
Yes.
as long as you are helping.
Yes, yes.
So that's the critical thing that you should look out for.
Okay, so they are not like, hey, look at me, I'm giving.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
yes, I get that.
Yep.
Okay, and you mentioned in an article and an interview before that not enough young lawyers are heading towards criminal law. Why do you think this is the case? And is there anything we can do to encourage more, other than this podcast?
Yeah.
Is there anything we can do to encourage more
Well,
people?
the thing is, I think the time for the pure criminal lawyer is over. You need to be multidisciplinary.
Right.
So there are certain firms out there which let you do a mixture of civil litigation as well as criminal litigation. Okay. In terms of pure crime, I think there were two things that help engage the younger lawyers. The first was the class fellow scheme. So lawyers were working full time on criminal matters there and building their skill set. And then when they return to their firms or when they join other firms thereafter, they have the ability to handle criminal matters as well as civil matters or whatever the case may be. Then the new development is, of course, the PDO.
Yep.
PDO has full-time lawyers doing criminal work. They should be there for a number of years, I hope, before they go out and branch out and do their own things with that solid grounding in criminal law already. So there will be, it's the evolution of the criminal bar. And let's see where it goes.
Yeah. So when you see less and less people going into criminal law, has it been a recent thing? Because, I interviewed Shashi Nadan in season 1, and he talked about how most criminal lawyers, I'm quoting him, most criminal lawyers are Indian and male. Subhas is yourself.
I'm Chindian.
You're Chindian, yes, I know.
Well, interestingly, my associate director is Diana Niam. She's
Yep.
a feisty Chinese girl. And we have our new associate of 2 years, Joyce Koo.
Oh, okay.
She's a fierce Chinese girl as well.
Okay, nice. So maybe we have to give way to the fierce Chinese girls.
Well, the monopoly on fierce Chinese girls is AGC.
I used to be one of them. Okay, very interesting.
So I think criminal defense, for whatever reason, Indian lawyers gravitated towards, some Indian lawyers gravitated, the older ones at least, seem to be doing that, but many of them do other areas of the law as well.
Of course.
Yeah. And then we don't need to talk about racial stereotypes.
No, not talking about racial stereotypes.
But the fact remains that criminal law doesn't pay as well as other areas of law.
Yeah. And maybe that's one of the reasons why we don't see enough.
That, frankly, is the key reason. I mean, if all criminals were rich, then all senior counsel will be rushing to do criminal cases also.
So what do you see as the way forward for aspiring criminal lawyers? They have to have lower salary expectations, I guess. But how do you think we can support this next new generation of lawyers? Because I'm sure there are law students, aspiring lawyers listening to this.
We've seen many successful private practitioners who are doing criminal law now who are former DPPs. Because I've always held the view that the training in AGC for young lawyers is very good. Just don't get indoctrinated too much. But the skills training that they give, the caliber of people that they produce from year to year, and then private sector couple them over.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
so that's one avenue.
Yes.
The other avenue is joining particular firms that do crime, civil, and other things as well, litigation in general. And then you can focus in certain areas of crime if there is an inclination.
Okay, well said. What's the way forward for Sunil, who aspires to be the best criminal lawyer in Singapore?
I think, aspirations aside, we want to be in a setup, and we are in a setup that allows us to do what we want, which is we get our fair share of paid work, but we can return to society doing our fair share of pro bono work as well. I am currently the president of ACLS, the Association of Criminal Lawyers. I'm stepping down in January. Our new president will be Tan Hee Jok, and I've been demoted to vice president. But no, it's all part of
succession planning.
That's right. But ACLS, together with the Association of Muslim Lawyers, helmed by Norm Marikan, we help out with something called the Enhanced Guidance for Plea scheme.
Oh.
So that's a scheme whereby the court actually assigns us cases, and we try to keep them on Thursday afternoons. We call them Pro-bono Thursdays.
Right, right.
Thursday afternoons, we get our court sessions with certain accused persons who don't have lawyers but need a bit of advice to guide them along their case.
Okay, to PG, to plead
No,
guilty.
well, PG is one option. Sometimes when they talk to us, we say you should fight.
Mm.
And then we can refer them to class or wherever.
I see. Okay, interesting. PG stands for
Plea of guilt.
Plea of guilt, yes. Okay, so we've heard so much from Sunil, the criminal defense lawyer. Before we wrap up the podcast, we want to switch it up and get to the rapid fire round questions.
Yes. Okay.
So describe yourself in one word.
Hungry.
Okay. It's going to be lunchtime soon. So a book or movie that changed your life?
Meet Joe Black.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah. I think there was a quote by, can't remember it. Somebody said you must sing with rapture and dance like a dervish. About living
nice.
life.
I must rewatch that show. What's your favorite month of the year?
I would say November.
Okay, not December.
No, not December.
Yeah.
December is the end of the party.
Yeah.
November is the start of the party.
That's true. Okay, so complete the sentence. When
Yeah.
he's not working, Sunil can be found.
Eating sushi.
Oh, nice. If you could learn another language, what would it be?
Malayalam. Malayalam is, so my Indian Subhas is Malayali.
Okay.
We speak Malayalam.
Oh.
Okay, my family speaks Malayalam. I unfortunately didn't pick it up. Malayalis are from Kerala. So my grandfather was from Kerala. Grandfather and grandmother were from Kerala.
Okay, I learned something new today. Favorite legal TV show?
Boston Legal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was great.
I suppose it's a generational thing.
Yes.
Early days it was Matlock, of course, if you remember. But then Boston Legal came with such wonderful language from James Spader.
Yes. Durian, love or hate?
Hate.
Yeah.
Unless you can find me, the super bitter ones with no smell.
Oh, wow. Okay. Maybe next time. What is the first thing that comes to mind when I say bar?
Bar. Brothers.
Oh, like bros.
Brothers at the bar. I mean, we use brothers to mean sisters as well, obviously.
Yes.
But I think the bar in Singapore is quite united.
Okay.
We obviously disagree on certain things. But I think all want what's best for Singapore. We have differing views as to how to get there. But I think the criminal bar, at least, is quite united.
Yeah. Wow, that's an amazing way to end the podcast. Thank you for your time and being a guest on the show. I really appreciate it, Sunil.
Very happy to.
Thanks so much. If you've enjoyed this episode, then rate it, review it, and follow me on LinkedIn. Rate us 5 stars on Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts. Tune in next time to find out what's in store for us after the bar. Bye.
Bye. And follow me on Instagram.
Yes.